What's happening? Welcome into the Matt Bernier Show, part of the In the Money Media Network. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. This is episode 12 of the new and improved Matt Bernier Show for Monday, April the 27th, 2020. Hopefully wherever you are listening or watching, you are doing so safely. Hopefully the weather's nicer than it is here in Massachusetts. A pretty crummy day. 40 degrees, wind's been blowing all night, it's raining sideways, just not a fun day. The good news is we have nowhere to be. We can't go outside, so get all the crap weather out of the way now while we're all sort of locked down. And then hopefully when things return to some sort of normalcy, we can go outside and the weather will, Mother Nature will do us a solid given the way everything's been going. However you've been listening, thanks for doing so. Please make sure you rate, review, and subscribe. You can find this on inthemoneypodcast.com along with all of the other podcasts and content that In the Money Media has, and there's a million things. The boys and girls over there are cranking out, you name it, all sorts of different stuff. Kinchin's got his podcast, Naomi's got hers, the In the Ring podcast, obviously the In the Money podcast, and then this one as well. You've got Redboard Rewind is back. You got a million things over there. Head on over to inthemoneypodcast.com. If you listen to, let's say, on your phone, you have Apple Podcasts. I don't know what the deal is with an Android. I'm ignorant to that sort of thing. There's got to be a podcast app over there. But then I know there's a fair amount of you over on YouTube as well. Just type in Matt Bernier Show right up top. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure the bell icon is lit up so whenever something new is uploaded, whether it's an episode of this or something else, you get notified, and it kind of gives you the heads up that you can go over and watch that. This week is going to be almost a sort of a retro type of feel, because back in the day when I did 2 a week, I would do a review and a preview. Well, because Oaklawn has drawn the Arkansas Derby so early, there's 2 divisions of it. I'm going to go over both of them. May not be a super deep dive into all of the contenders, but I'll show some replays from what we can find on YouTube that's readily available. The audio will be a little bit different just because I'm using a different software to go through with that and show you the replays and talk over it. So I'll go over both divisions of the Arkansas Derby, and then we'll wrap things up with updated pick history and this week's Q&A. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first division of this year's Arkansas Derby, 170 points total for each of the races. And boy, that first division, they're going to all have to beat the big boy, Charlatan. First division of the 2020 Arkansas Derby 3-year-olds mile and an eighth on the only track down at Oaklawn Park, the main track, the dirt. Split into 2 fields because of the overdrawn group, simply because there are no other places for these 3-year-olds to go this time of year. So the Arkansas Derby is the winner. You're going to get 2 Grade 1 winners, 2 Grade 1 winning 3-year-olds exiting Saturday afternoon's races down there at Oaklawn in Hot Springs, Arkansas. We'll start with the first division. And again, I'm not going to do a deep dive into all these horses. I'm just going to touch on who I think are some of the logical, likely contenders in each of the races. This first division, it's pretty cut and dry. I really think there's probably only 2, but I'll touch on a couple other ones that could be fringe contenders. You can see Charlatan here. I believe this is an appropriate or an accurate morning line. I don't know for certain. I'm just going off of what's in my past performances. Even money on the morning line. Look, from a numbers standpoint, he lays over this field. He is just so much faster than everyone else. He looks like he could be a superstar. The pedigree is there. The connections are there. I'm a little bit interested in seeing how he's going to handle the inside, because I feel like in some of his workouts in the mornings, and again, I'm not an expert as far as workouts are concerned, but from what I've seen, it just looks like he has one way to go, and that he just wants to run. I don't know if this horse has the ability to rate if needed. Having said that, I don't know that he's really going to be faced with that sort of issue. Timeform US is right here. They've got the pace projector. Him basically up there with Shooter's Shoot. Now, Shooter's Shoot comes out of a pretty solid effort, winning his most recent run. The problem is, if you like Shooter's Shoot, he was humbled 3 starts back by Charlatan in Charlatan's career debut. So you have that working against you. I think Charlatan's going to go right to the front. I don't think they're going to think twice about it. You've got Martin Garcia listed to ride. Now go back and take a look at his first time going 2 turns. He's out there. There's really not a hell of a lot to say about this. This is just a racehorse that he looks like he could be anything. He looks like he could be a legitimate superstar. Baffert has made mention of that a few different times. He's doing this rather easily. He's already opened up, put about 2 lengths on the field at this point, maybe 2.5. And you see that Drayden Van Dyke, who rode him this day and has ridden him in each of his first 2 lifetime starts, he's not really asking him. He's just kind of keeping him to task. You see the other riders, they're all out trying to catch up and keep pace with this horse, but Drayden's going to give him a couple cracks here with the left hand, and he's just going to open up for fun. And I think that's the most exciting part about this horse thus far. And I can even say the same about what I've seen in some of his workouts, is that it feels like when he's given his cue, it feels kind of like, I'll make an analogy to baseball. In early innings for pitchers in baseball games, very rarely are you going to see them airing it out. You're going to see usually they just want to kind of get into the rhythm of things. You're going to start with a lot of fastballs. You don't want to show off your entire repertoire first time through the order, just because you don't want to compromise your chances as you have to go through second and hopefully third time. Although this day and age, third time through the order seems highly unlikely. The point is, some of the best pitchers are the ones that have the ability to start the series off and start the game off living in, let's say, that 93 range, and being able to ramp up and being able to have a little bit extra in the tank. And I know, one of the more obvious ones in recent memory is Justin Verlander, who he can start off throwing that 94, 95 mile an hour fastball, and then later on in the game, he still has the ability to reach back and dial up that 97, 98, 99 in some occasions. I feel like that's what I've seen from Charlatan so far in that most recent run, as well as his morning workouts, where he's going incredibly fast and he's doing it very, very easily early on. But then when he's given the cue, he can reach back and throw that 97, 98 miles an hour and still be able to draw away from the field. He's strictly the horse to beat. I'm not breaking any news there. My friend's Beer, and for the horses that I just think, I'm not doing the deep dive in, I'll just make a quick little comment. I think right now the horse is just too slow. I can say the same for Mimosa. Gouverneur Morris. Gouverneur Morris is, I made no bones about it. I do like this horse. I think he's talented. I think there's still something here. Admittedly, I was a little bit disappointed with the Florida Derby. I thought it was on a bit of the lackluster side, but upon going back and looking at the replays, looking at the way the track was playing, I think he was running against the bias that day. I thought it was a little bit of a speed-friendly strip down at Gulfstream, more so than it typically is. And again, you're only going to really know that if you go back and you watch the tape and you look at the charts and see where the horses are positioned. I thought he really did a fair amount of running against it. He was also wide throughout. I thought it was a pretty solid effort. Maybe he's not as good as I had thought he was. Having said that, I still think there is something here with this horse. I'm going to rewind it a little bit here as they're coming out of the clubhouse turn for the first time. He's in the Team Valor silks between runners right now, and this is also a bit of I don't want to say an unfamiliar position for him, but having to run against much better horses in races that maybe it's not unfolding in the ideal sort of situation or scenario for him. He would have really appreciated a faster pace up front. He probably will appreciate getting away from Gulfstream Park. And you can see Johnny V right now here is already pumping on him. He's giving him a couple taps on the shoulder saying, we got to get going here, boss. He's under the whip here just inside the half mile. So clearly, we're trying to get something here. Meanwhile, up front, here comes Tiz the Law, who, you could make the argument, if you're not a Charlatan or a Nadal or any of the other big names on the West Coast, if you're not one of their big fans, you can make the argument, and I would, that Tiz the Law is every bit as good, if not better. Gouverneur Morris is trying here, though, and I think that's the most heartening thing I can pull from this. No, it was not the big effort that maybe some had predicted, and I still think the horse is very, very talented. But considering this was his second start as a 3-year-old of his 3-year-old campaign, I running against the bias, running against good horses that have run at Gulfstream already, that are accustomed to the racetrack. Keep in mind, Gouverneur Morris ran at Tampa in that N1X. I thought it was a pretty decent effort, and it made me sort of reassess things when I went back and watched the replay a few more times, because again, I didn't pick him. I thought Tiz the Law would win that day, but initially I said, maybe Gouverneur Morris isn't as good as I thought he was. You know what? Looking back on it, maybe he's still not as good as I thought he was, but that was actually a sneaky good effort in my opinion. If you are so inclined to try to beat a horse like Charlatan, I think a horse like Gouverneur Morris is one of the more likely upsetters. He's 9-2 apparently on the morning line. I'd have to price out the race and do a full-blown deep dive into it, but I don't know that I'd be in a rush to take 4.5 to 1 in a race like this with a horse like Governor Morris. The good news is for the connections, a bit of a blessing in disguise. He wasn't going to have the points necessary in all likelihood to get into the Kentucky Derby. Now that everything is sort of pushed back, you have time. You can look at it and say, oof, we actually might have dodged a bullet here, and we have another chance to get involved that first Saturday in September. Jungle Runner, a horse that looks entirely too slow on paper for Asmussen. Shooter Shoot, again, he really has continued to improve. His 2 runs going 2 turns most recently, they were both solid. The speed figures have come back solid. The problem I have is not only is he a speed horse, the other predominant speed horse is Charlatan, and Charlatan just took his cookies here in this run 3 starts back. So, I don't know what you want to do. I think Shooter Shoot is in over his head in a spot like this. I think the most difficult thing for a horse like this and for the connections, you have to go put Charlatan away, and then if you successfully do that, you need to deal with the horses coming from off of it. I feel like that's a lot to ask. Wrecking Crew, I don't know that the horse is necessarily that good. Second off the bench, maybe you're going to get a forward move here. You're going to need it if he's going to have any chance in a spot like this. Anno D'Or is the other one I'm sure some folks will look at and say, well, why not him? His Risen Star, I just draw a line through it, I guess. That's all you really can do. The problem is that's the only run we have since the beginning of December as a 2-year-old. His 2-year-old form, I really liked everything I saw from the horse. He looked great in that debut up at Golden Gate. That was on grass. He comes back, and he loses a heartbreaker in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. And you look at it and say, oh, man, he should have gone by, stormed the court, and X, Y, and Z. Look, the elephant in the room is you take a look at that Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and I don't mean this to be an advertisement for Formulator, but, this is not a particularly strong race. So you have that going against you if you're a fan of Anno D'Or. And then if you wanted to say, well, he proved in the Los Al Futurity that was no fluke. Well, the problem with the Los Al Futurity is that race has come back poor as well. 1,000 words is not all that in a bag of chips. So Anno D'Or, he could certainly sort of flip the script, get back to his best races, take that step forward. I think the horse is very, very talented. I'm starting to wonder a little bit, though, was his 2-year-old form, I don't want to say a mirage, but given it stacked up favorably against his competition. Now when the waters get deeper and wider, it's not looking so hot. And then you couple that with the dud and the Risen Star, the blinkers come off here. We'll see what we get from Anno D'Or. If it doesn't work here, look, the horse can still be a monster on turf. I'm not questioning that. I think there's a ton of ability here. I just am not sure. Again, 6 to 1 on the morning line. That's not doing anything for me. Winning Impression is a pretty decent horse, I think, for Dallas Stewart. From a numbers standpoint, yes, he's on the slower side, but I say slower side. It's not, they're all going to be slow compared to Charlatan. Then there is a pretty significant drop between Charlatan, Governor Morris, Anno D'Or, Shooter Shoot, and then the rest of the field. But Winning Impression is probably right at the top of that list as far as that second group of horses is concerned. He seems to continue to improve with the exception of the first 2 starts. Draw lines through those because they were sprints. The minute they stretched him out in distance, he really started running quite well. So, I guess if you're looking for a complete wild card in here, maybe a horse like Winning Impression is one you want to keep an eye on. Crypto Cash, I think, is too slow in a spot like this, although to be fair, his only win one of his only wins to date came on dirt at Ellis Park. 3 starts back. His last start over the summer on dirt as a 2-year-old. We'll find out maybe going from synthetic back to the dirt is going to be to this one's liking. And then you have Basin on the outside. I know some people are interested in Basin, and I had a number of people tell me after the Rebel, oh, this is going to be a great race for him. And I understand the rationale, moving into the hot pace, first start off the layoff, first start going 2 turns. He should have moved forward. I thought he was just kind of moving evenly, and I didn't expect a giant move forward, and we didn't get a giant move forward. Now, he did move into the teeth of the pace in that Oak Lawn Stakes, which we'll take a look at when I talk about the second division, but even having said that, I just never really, I don't, Basin to me needs to prove that he actually belongs in that upper echelon. It's one thing to win a grade 1 going 1 turn at Saratoga as a 2-year-old. It's another thing to prove that you're a proper sort of classic Triple Crown type as a 3-year-old. And to me, at this point, Basin has not done that. So, again, breaking no news here. Charlatan is way the horse to beat in a spot like this. I'm not giving a pick right now. I'm not going to give a pick for either of the races. This is more just an overview to spitball a little bit. Let me know what your thoughts are in the first division of this year's Arkansas Derby beneath the video player on YouTube or on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. Now, let us take a look at division number 2. Division 2 of the 2020 Arkansas Derby, race 13, Saturday at Oak Lawn, mile and an eighth, main track, only racetrack, It's all the same stuff as that first division, except this race I think is a little bit more wide open, and you can go a few different ways as opposed to just looking at it saying it's charlatan and then everyone else. Finnick the Fierce, I think, is one of the slower horses. I don't know that I love his chances in a spot like this. Caught a wet track in that most recent run, but he's run quite well on wet tracks in the past. I'd be surprised if he won the race, but having said that, look, anything can happen. These 3-year-olds can jump up in a big, big way. Timeform US has the pace projected being fast. You can see Nadal out here on the front. You can see a horse like Wells Bayou being close. You can see King Guillermo being close. So, and then you've got the 2-year-old champion Storm the Court. So it doesn't seem like there's going to be any shortage of pace in here. If you are looking for a horse coming from off of it, you probably shouldn't have any issue. But having said that, we've seen time and time again, whereas the distances get longer, speed ends up being more of an asset than any other point really in any of these races. Saratogian. Look, a complete dud in that most recent run. He was 60-1. He's too slow right now. I suppose you want to take a shot. You take a look at the pedigree. Maybe he'll appreciate going out to 2 turns, but he seems hard to make on paper anyway. Storm the Court in here for Peter Urton. Won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile last year. I made mention in the first division. I thought that, in hindsight, slow race, not a great field. He comes back in the San Vicente. I really liked this effort. I thought it was a promising starting off point. He tried to rally from off of it going 7/8. He probably wants every bit of 2 turns. And he comes back in the San Felipe, and he was just no match for the top 2. And I think the top 2 are both very good, very talented, Authentic and Honor AP. He's catching other talented horses in here, and I still don't know if he can pass horses if he needs to. So unless they are on an absolute quarter horse mission out of the gate to make the front, which they may be, I don't know that he can win this race. I wouldn't take him at 6-1. I need to do a full-blown deep dive into this field to think about what I would consider, but frankly, I don't know that I would want any part of him in this race. He still needs to prove to me that he actually belongs with these types. Speed is his asset. The problem is he doesn't have the best speed in this race, even at a route. So I think Storm the Court might be in a little bit of a tough position. King Guillermo. What a neat story. What a, I don't know what to make of this horse, because he didn't do anything really wrong as a 2-year-old. You can see that he broke his maiden on grass by 100, comes back, runs a really solid race in the pulpit on turf. So he's stakes placed. Then he's gone for months, and he comes back in the Tampa Bay Derby, and at face value, I look at it and go, a 50-1 shot sits just off the pace, and he wins, and no one else really seems to do a ton of running in this race, with the exception of a horse like Chance It, who is gone for quite some time now. He's laid up on the farm. But when you go and watch the tape of this race, there's really no, what else are you supposed to say? This was a giant performance from this horse. Anyone that's paid attention to Tampa, outside is where you'd like to be throughout. Going 2 turns and really anywhere on the main track, you'd rather be closer than coming from farther off of it. Doesn't mean that you can't close, but you'd rather be closer. Again, that's not really breaking any news. That's where you want to be on all dirt surfaces in the United States. This is the most impressive part of this race, though, to me, is he's extending. He's finishing. It's not like you've got other horses that are just, kind of chopping along and nobody's really... He is cooking. And, these are the kind of races that I think, for me anyway, that make me rethink what I initially thought in the aftermath of a performance. Where when I first saw it, again, I said, 1,000,000-1 shot, pretty perfect trip. Yeah, he carried some ground, but perched just off the pace, takes over, goes on and wins. Maybe it was a suspect field to begin with. Solo Volante, nice horse, but had to come from last. But with the way that he powered home, and I think that's when you can start to really look at the difference between fluky winners at giant prices and giant priced winners that either A, have turned the corner or should never have been the price that they were. I remember a few years ago, unfortunately, the horse, the ill-fated IRAP. I remember I was at the racing form still, and we would talk about IRAP and go, IRAP's not that good. And then I can't remember if I think it was the Indiana Derby, that he was awesome and he powered home. And I know he won the race at Keeneland, but I thought it was a little bit of a fluke. I didn't think anybody really did a ton of running. The race in the Indiana Derby, I believe it was the Indiana Derby. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. He powered down the lane. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. This all of a sudden, this is a horse that I think he's turned the corner, and maybe, maybe he's not the butt of the jokes anymore. Maybe he's serious. When I go back and watch this replay for the race from King Guillermo in the Tampa Bay Derby, I can't help but look at the way that he finished and say, this was a damn good performance. And like, he's 3-1. I don't know that I'm in a rush to bet him at 3-1, but I'm not going to fault anyone that says that race was legitimate. He deserves to be one of the short prices in this race, and he deserves to be among the more highly fancied 3-year-olds at this point. Very interesting horse anyway. I again, not saying I'm picking him, not saying I'm going to bet him. I don't know. We'll see in time. But at the very least, he's one of the more interesting horses of the weekend for me, because I want to see if he can back up that Tampa Bay Derby against better horses. Nadal. Nadal ran in the Rebel most recently. His first time going 2 turns, first time shipping from Santa Anita, first time in a wet track. Took on unbelievable amount of pace early on. Just absolutely breathing down his neck was American Theorem throughout. I frankly, as the race was being run, thought those 2 horses would run up the track and be nowhere when it was all said and done. And all Nadal did was kick on and fight off a 1,000,000-to-1 accession coming from dead last. We're taking them as they go into the far turn here. And, coming out of the clubhouse turn, you can see the pace is already honest. There are 2 horses to keep an eye on. This horse down here in the yellow and blue, this is Nadal pretty clearly. Keep an eye on the gray horse, mid-pack here. This is Silver Prospector. He's also going to be running in this division. I'll tell you when we really want to keep an eye on him. Nadal, there's nothing else to say at this point. He's taking a ton of pressure right now. Keep an eye on Silver Prospector right now. I think Santana does an interesting thing, and I can understand why he's doing it. He's beginning to make his move down the backside. He wants to procure that inside position, and he also knows that the horse that he needs to beat, one of them anyway, is Nadal. The other one is 3 Technique, who's out in the clear. So let's get up into the run a little bit. Let's get closer to the pace. Having said that, and I'll show you why I'm at least mildly intrigued with Silver Prospector when this is all said and done, he moved into the hottest part of the pace. And when the other horses up front, the Nadals of the world, were getting a little bit of a breather, Silver Prospector was actually having to do the most running that he had to do in the entire race. Now at this point, Silver Prospector, I don't have much of an excuse for, to be honest, other than the fact that he did a ton of running into the hottest part. Nadal, for him to keep finding, what else is there to say? This was a giant performance from this horse. He's done nothing wrong in 3 lifetime starts. The pedigree would suggest that the distance is no problem for him. Now, I've long wondered if 1 turn would be better for him, and I still will wonder that. But having said that, I can't sit here and knock anything about that race. What else could you possibly want from a racehorse? He takes unbelievable pressure throughout. He buries that horse, and still has something left in the tank to fight off the horse coming from dead last, who had the unbelievable pace set up. Nadal is just a quality racehorse through and through. I don't care what his game will end up being. If he ends up being a 1.25 mile horse, great. If he ends up being a 7/8 horse, great. Well, it doesn't make a difference to me. He's just a talented racehorse. He's going to have some other pace pressure. He's going to have more quality pace pressure. And I think that's an important differentiating factor. When American Theorem goes away in that Rebel, it's probably not going to be the situation or the case here on Saturday. Whether it's Storm the Court, whether it's King Guillermo, whether it's Wells Bayou. These are more talented horses that are going to be up there keeping him company. I'm going to be curious to see how Nadal can sort of counter that situation. Code Runner, again, seems slow on paper. Not much else to add. Silver Prospector. The reason I brought him up when we were watching the replay of the Rebel, and again, I'll take a quick look and show you some of the running lines here. You can see Accession comes from 100 out of it. Basin rallies from mid-pack. Three Technique, we saw him perched out in the clear throughout. Silver Prospector, you probably look at it and you go, well, this is a terrible effort. He ended up finishing up the track. I agree with you about the finish. The only thing I'll say is when you go through and you take a look at the incremental splits, and that's the way that I always break down races. I used to split them up. I used to only look at the incrementals for turf compared to dirt. I look at incrementals for all surfaces now. Turf, dirt, synthetic, doesn't matter. I want to know what those are coupled with the pace figures for each of those. Take a look at the half, or let's say the second quarter for Silver Prospector, 23:47. Fast, no question about it, right? Take a look at Nadal's, 23:11, about a length, almost 2 lengths faster. Now he's up there setting the fractions, so it makes sense. Look at the third quarter for Nadal. This is when, as fast as it is, and again, you can see Timeform US has assigned this split a 132 from a pace figure standpoint. The 25:38 is a far cry from Silver Prospector's 24:60. That's about a 4-length difference. So Silver Prospector had to make up that ground at arguably one of the hottest points of the entire race. So he probably needed to use a little bit more energy than ideal. And the reason I bring that up, and I'll go back to the chart, is if Santana doesn't push when he does Silver Prospector have the opportunity to run in a more similar situation or a more similar position to the way Accession does? If he takes advantage of the hot pace and can rally from off of it, if he saves that late energy, as opposed to expending it going into the far turn to get up into that pocket position, does Silver Prospector run differently? That's the main thing that I'm keeping an eye on right now, and I'm thinking about going towards Saturday, and I'm sure I'll look at it about 15 times between now and then. But I wonder if Silver Prospector and Santana, and I'm not criticizing the ride, I understand why he did it. Especially if you think Nadal's the horse to beat and you're afraid of Three Technique, you want to be able to get up there and be within striking range. But you made your move into the hottest part of the race. And when we go back in hindsight and you see the horse that came from last rallying into it at 1,000,000 to 1, no question you're a better horse than Accession is. If you had just waited down there and let the pace materialize and let it unfold in front of you, maybe he can come with the run. And I'm going to say the 3/4 length difference, perhaps it's a little bit different if a horse like Silver Prospector is the one making the run as opposed to Accession. Just a theory. Curious what your thoughts are beneath the video player on YouTube or on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. Fast enough. Is he fast enough? I don't know. 2 turns. I know he's a really nice horse. He's a beautiful. He's done some really, really nice things. You know, he won the Cal Cup Derby as a 2-year-old, or excuse me, as an early 3-year-old going 2 turns. This is just such a giant difference from facing the Calbred ranks. And I know he ran well in that San Vicente, but boy, you not only you couldn't get Nadal that day, but you got some other legitimate runners to deal with. I think he's got an uphill battle to fight. I think Tation's got an uphill battle to fight despite this giant race here 2 starts back. Also can't help but notice that came when he was outright on the lead. He did sit close to the pace in the Oaklawn. And I say sit close to it. He made a move very similar to what I was just speaking of with Silver Prospector. And we'll take a look at that race in a moment because the horse drawn just to his outside, I think, is live in here in Farmington Road. Farmington Road took advantage. He had the Accession trip of that race. Are you following me? The idea that he came from last with the hot pace, took advantage of it all, still couldn't get the job done. A little bit disappointing, but if Tation waits a little bit, he basically ran, to me, the Silver Prospector race from the Rebel. He paid the price, but he wasn't totally embarrassed in a spot like this. Let's take a look at that race now. You can see the fractions, again, hot. I mean, it feels like all those races down at Oaklawn, everybody's going an honest pace. 45 in a piece. Way back here in those Eclipse Silks, this is Farmington Road. Tation is reasonably close to this thing. I'm still going to side with a horse like Farmington Road because I believe in the talent. I think there's something here. Yes, he got a beautiful setup in a spot like this. Should he have won the race? I don't know. That's up to you as a handicapper to decide what you thought of it. But I like him rallying wide back here. Yes, he is following the horse that ends up winning the race. there's a part of me that feels like Farmington Road is still an unfinished product. I hate that he seemingly lacks early speed, but I think he's going to run all day. I have no issues with distance for him at any point this year. I don't care if it's the Travers, the Kentucky Derby, if they choose to run in a race like the Belmont. It doesn't make a difference. He will run all day. It's just a matter of, does he have too much work to do given his relation to the pace setters? Because with the exception of this race here at Tampa, which again he faced inferior company, he just doesn't have any kind of early speed. And that to me is a very, very concerning piece. Now, the other thing I will say is Pletcher with blinkers on going into graded stakes races, I believe, is a terrible, terrible stat. We can look at it right now. I can either confirm or deny that. But the idea is that first time in a graded stake with the blinkers on is usually not a good move for Todd. Class, here we go. Graded stake. Why not? Where are we? Equipment change. Where? I'm lost. Here we are. First time blinkers in a graded stakes race for Todd. I don't believe the number's particularly good. 9%, 2 for 22, and only 6 have hit the board. Now, if you just go with graded stakes and you go with just blinkers on, with blinkers, you get a different number. You get 14%. So I'm wondering again if this all kind of contributes to my working theory and my hopeful theory as well, just because I like the horse and I've got him at giant prices for future bets. I think it's a work in progress. I think it's positive that Javier is going to come and take the mount in a spot like this. He should get pace to run at. The 1 1/8 again. He'll run all day. He is one of the horses I am least concerned about as far as the distance is concerned. I wish he was a little bit more forward. I wish he didn't have to come from 100 out of it. To be fair, though, he himself went 47-2 for the half mile. They were just going that fast. Does that mean all of a sudden that he's a horse that can sit a nice sort of trip? I don't know. I just wish he had a little bit more early foot. But I do think Farmington Road's a nice runner. I think he'll continue to improve. And the last one I'll touch on here is Wells Bayou. Now, Wells Bayou, the draw is no bargain coming from out in the parking lot. His running style is also potentially going to be an issue for him. This is the Louisiana Derby. This is on NBC Sports channel here on YouTube. I learned nothing from this race. I knew he was a good horse with the lead. I know he set a relatively honest pace. The pace held up. The horse that I'm most interested in coming out of this race is this one with the white silks rolling on the outside. That's Modernist. I've said it for how many times on this podcast. I think he's a Belmont Stakes type of horse. Wells Bayou, he ran just fine here. I mean, I don't know what else there's to say. He goes out there to the lead. You see Flo giving him a couple cracks, keeping him to task. He finishes quite well. The race didn't come back particularly fast. It came back fine. My bigger concern for a horse like this in a race like this is the dynamics, because breaking from the far outside, unless he is just on an absolute send mission, which maybe he will be. I mean, I frankly would appreciate that if they were just very, very aggressive with him out of the gate. He is going to have a very difficult time, or he's going to need to show the ability to sit off of a target and still be effective. Is he capable of doing that? I have no idea, and I don't think anyone does at this point, simply because he's never been tasked with that. In all of his races, he's been on the lead at the pace call. So, who knows if he's capable of sitting off if he needs to, or if he's just on an absolute send mission. It's going to be very, very interesting for those horses drawn to the inside, whether it is Nadal, whether it is Storm the Court, whether it is any of these horses that are going to figure to be forwardly placed in a race like this. It's just King Guillermo. I think this is a very, very fun race. King Guillermo, to me, is the most interesting horse running all weekend, outside of Charlatan. I think Charlatan has... I think he's the goods. King Guillermo, he very well could be the goods. I just want to see if he can do it again against better horses here at 1 1/8 off of a little bit of a layoff. We'll find out. This is a fascinating race. You can go a few different ways. Let me know who you like and why beneath the video player on YouTube or on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. All right. I had recorded this whole thing and then I realized I was just rambling. and rambling and rambling and rambling. So I'm going to start over. Pick history and Q&A. Pick history updated 100. We have 100 as far as the sample size is concerned. The strike rate is 21% winners, 49% in the money, 258 ROI with the winners, 212 ROI as far as across the board is concerned. So both of those are in the black. As far as the win rates are concerned, I would have hoped they'd be a little bit higher. 21% should have been closer to 23. The 49 should have been closer to 55%. We're at the 100 though, and I've been saying from the jump, I felt like 100 was the barometer. Once we get to that point, you can start drawing some conclusions. I'm very happy and proud that the first 100 are in the black as far as the return on investment is concerned. And frankly, that's really all that matters. But I also have the pride element of wanting to have my numbers live up to what I think they should be. And from a win percentage rate and from a win play show rate, they're a little light. Not tremendously, but they're a little light. 21% for the win should be closer to 23. 49 should be closer to 55. But when push comes to shove, we're trying to make money, and following the public selections that I've put out there, you'd be in the black at this point. So I'm happy about that. I know I had made mention that there was going to be an announcement about something coming up this week. I'm going to push that off until next Monday because we've pushed back a little bit. So, but there will be something coming up next Monday as far as an announcement is concerned. It definitely pertains to where you'll be able to find selections and things like that going forward. But for now, just hang tight. That'll come. Let's get to the Q&A. And hopefully I don't ramble the way that I did in that last one I just recorded. You can find the easiest way for me to see these is beneath the video player on YouTube. I do see everything that you send on Twitter. It just gets all kind of lost in the shuffle, especially if it's earlier in the week. I'm more inclined to reply to those directly and immediately than I am here. Here is a good area for me to be able to come back and spitball back and forth. First one, just wanted to say thank you to John Peruso and everyone else that wished congrats. Obviously, last Friday, a good day for me. Won the BCBC seat, finished second in the 10K over on horse tourneys. I'm just happy to get the BCBC piece out of the way because it's my favorite contest of the year. I think it's the best contest you can possibly play in. I haven't played in a number of years. I've played twice. First year I finished sixth. Second year I went broke. Last time I played was 5 years ago at Keeneland. Here we are in 2020 going back to Keeneland, so I'm looking forward to that. Should be a good time. This kind of is a good way to sort of roll into Josh Butler's question and comment. As a public handicapper, do you point towards certain contests or betting challenges each year, like say a golfer plans their season around majors, or are you more focused on making improvements on a day-to-day basis? I think both can be true. From a handicapping standpoint, I feel like on a day-to-day basis, you need to continue to improve. If you're not improving, you're likely getting passed. And that means don't be afraid to try something different, trying different tools and a different way to handicap a race or whatever the case may be. Don't be afraid to change. Having said that, if you find something that works, keep going until it no longer works. As far as the tournaments are concerned, I mean, year in and year out, goal number one for me is the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. I'm not one that buys into the big contests. A lot of people do. If I had $1 million in just expendable income to blow, maybe I would. But for me, I'm much more inclined to try to qualify through feeders, whether it's on horse players or horse tourneys or something like that, than to put up $10,000 up front and play. Which is why I'm as happy and excited as I am that I've got this part out of the way. The 10K buy-in is done. It's tucked away until November. We're good to go. I do know a number of players, look, they call them the majors, or some of the majors anyway. Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge, Belmont Stakes Betting Challenge, NHC, National Horse Players Championship. Santa Anita has a ton of great contests. Laurel has the big one. I know that's one that a number of handicappers circle on their calendar. All these different jurisdictions. Gulfstream has the Pegasus World Cup Betting Challenge. There's so many different great contests out there. I'm always going to lean more toward the cash ones. I've done well in the mythical ones in the past. I won Aqueduct's. I think it was the last time Aqueduct did a mythical $20 sort of win-play show type of wager contest, and that was years ago now. That was in 2014. So I'm open to anything and everything, and I know some people complain about different types of formats, and some people like the $2 win play, some people like the live event, some people like the pick and pray, some people like cash. The only thing I can say is you all know what you're getting into when you sign up for them. You know the rules, and if things don't work your way or don't go your way, I mean, look, that's just the nature of the beast. If you don't feel comfortable with that and you're going to complain about it, don't play. But you know what you're getting into going into it. My personal preference is to play cash because you can do basically anything you want. If I love a 2-to-1 shot and I've got $5,000 left, I can try to all of a sudden turn that into 10. Whereas with the $2 win place, that 2-to-1 is not going to do me any good in all likelihood if it's late in a contest. So just different things to think about. And don't be afraid if you have never played in a contest but you're considering it. I couldn't recommend them enough, whether it is on one of the websites, whether it's a Horse Players or a Horse Tourneys. ExpressBet runs contests. Naira has run contests in the past, and they still do. But I'd even recommend, if you're on your own, don't be afraid to, let's just use this coming Saturday at Oaklawn as an example. Good day of racing, full fields, all sorts of different stuff. From a very basic way of looking at it, give yourself, let's say, the last 10 races of the day. If you want to play your own $2 win place live event, go right ahead. The idea is that mythical, before each race, you write down, I'm going to pick the 1 in this race. And whatever happens with the 1 in that race, if the horse wins, you get the win in place value. If the horse misses everything, you get nothing. You move on. Don't be afraid to learn that way. Pick and pray. If you want to put in all 10 of your picks for those 10 races before the first one starts, that's a good way to sort of gauge and learn, do something like that. If you want to play a fake live event on your own, cash-wise, it can be $50, it could be $100, $200, $20, could be anything. The idea is, say, this is the starting bankroll, I have these 10 races, how much can I turn it into? Don't be afraid to play around that way. I did that before I really started diving into any of the contests way back when, and I felt like it was a good building block, a good way for me to learn and feel more comfortable when the real thing happened. I mean, it's no different than practice. That's what practice in sports is all about. You practice the reps to hopefully get yourself in a position where you're more comfortable with them when the real thing happens. Whether it's taking ground balls, whether it's making a 4-foot putt to save par, whether it's any of these different things. If you're a goalie in hockey and you got to stop the breakaway late in the third period, whatever the case may be. The idea is the practice reps are supposed to help you get a little bit more familiar and comfortable when the real thing happens. And it's just something I would recommend to folks if you're new to it or you're thinking about going forward. And also, just for sort of, if you're going to, let's say, try that sort of thing, the 10 races on Saturday at Oaklawn, you get $2 to win, $2 to place. Let's say whether it's pick and pray or live, a good little barometer or rule of thumb to at least be in the ballpark of winning some of these things. At the very least, you need to double up whatever the starting bankroll is. So for a $2 win place, if you're playing 10 races, theoretically that's $40, okay? In order to have any kind of chance in any of these contests, I think you at least need to double that. So you need to take your plays, whether you're playing live or you're going to play the pick and pray, you need to get to at least 80 if you're going to be remotely involved in any kind of a leaderboard. And in all likelihood, you probably need to be closer to 100 or something like that. But the point is, if you can get at least double up, if you can get to 80, I think you're doing well if you're just sort of starting things off and getting into the flow of things. And look, some days it's going to be easy to get to 80. Some days it's going to be like pulling teeth. Some days nobody will get to 80, and some days everyone will get to 170. It's just the nature of the beast. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. So if there are any other questions or thoughts, don't be afraid to leave those down here. I'm always open to shooting the breeze about that sort of thing. Nancy Moran, this was the question that I ended up going down just the deepest rabbit hole. And I said, I can't use this. I went on a tangent for about 20 minutes because I'm trying to just explain it all in as easy a fashion as I can. And I realized it was going to probably be more confusing than anything else. Looking at the quarter and half fractions in the count fleet, remember spoke about the count fleet on last week's pod. I don't understand how Timeform doesn't have the pace listed red. Can someone explain what other factors determine how the pace is listed besides the fractions themselves, just trying to learn things? I'm going to really do a very brief and low-level explanation of this, with the preface of saying, I don't know, I can't remember if it's Buyer on Speed or Picking Winners by Andy Buyer. He lays out the way that he goes about making figures. When I've experimented with doing the figure making, and I would encourage anyone, just try it. It's labor intensive. There's no two ways around that, especially if you don't have any kind of software helping you out. It's labor intensive, but I think it's a very good exercise, and whether you actually use the figures that you make or not, at least now you can have an idea of what goes into the figures that you see, whether it's Timeform, whether it's the Buyers, whether it's Equibase, whether it's Briz, and I know a couple of those are computer generated, so maybe that's a bad example, but you get what I'm saying. At least you know how the pie is made. You at least know what the recipe is to make the number. And then I feel like when you have a better understanding of it, you can at least go through and say, I agree or disagree. A lot of it has to do with par and the way that the racetrack is playing. If the racetrack is playing very, very fast or the racetrack is playing very, very slow, then what that race itself is from a speed standpoint in relation to par. When I say par, they'll take, let's say, the past X number. It goes years and years, but 6 furlong races for grade 3 runners. What's the quarter? What's the half? And how does that compare in relation to this one? Factoring in the track variant of how that track was playing that day. So if everything is just level, let's say the track is playing very, very normal as far as speed is concerned, where you're not having, I'm making it up, 21 flat opening quarters, and you're not having the reverse of that, 23 and 2 for an opening quarter going 6 furlongs. If everything is just kind of where it should be for grade 3 sprinters, you're not going to get anything crazy there. And then that's where that factors in, where you don't see a giant differential between the two. I have the chart here for the race. And again, this is where I started going down the rabbit hole. So I'm not going to go deep into it. But the fractions of 21.69, 44.67, just because the pace melted down doesn't necessarily mean that the pace was fast for the level or for the racetrack. Does that make sense? It could be a contested pace that led to things falling apart the way that it did, but it doesn't mean that it was actually faster than what par would suggest. And again, I could genuinely do 2 hours on trying to explain figures and give examples and things like that. The easiest way, though, would be to grab one of Andy Buyer's books again. I can't remember which one it is. It's either Buyer on Speed or Picking Winners. I don't think it's the Winning Horse Player. Maybe it is. It's one of those. Trust me. There's a big 3 for Buyer. You can actually, I think, last I saw, when I got mine years and years ago, you get the 3-pack. You get all 3 of them on Amazon for like $35-$40. I would highly recommend it because, again, at the very least, you at least know how figures are made and what is that figure? What does that mean? It's a lot easier to sort of digest and understand when you go through and read the whole thing. I wish I could spend more time. This thing would end up being about a 3-hour pod, though. So hopefully that at least helped a little bit. I don't know if it did or didn't, but it's a heck of a lot better than what I was doing with that first recording I did, because my God, it just went on forever and a day. Let's see if there's any other quick ones that we can touch on here. A Sincere JNN. I'm curious. I'm curious about the comment about Tom's d'Etat and Improbable, and then this can also kind of dovetail into a Twitter piece that I got earlier today and relating to one of these horses. Tom's d'Etat, this is from A Sincere JNN. Tom's d'Etat beat a now third stringer in Improbable, and it was life and death. Al Stahl is a very smart man. He's staying clear of the Oak Lawn handicap. Improbable has a chance to move back up. That was an impressive race coming from the outside post. My question here is, if you think Improbable has a chance to move up and he can be a nice horse and this, that, and the other thing, how can you earlier in the comment say that Tom's d'Etat, he beat a third stringer in Improbable? Isn't that kind of contradicting yourself? Tom's d'Etat, I think, is a better horse than Improbable is. I spoke about it last week. I make no bones about it. I'm not a huge Improbable fan. I think he's a talented horse. I think he's a little bit of a nutcase. I think Tom's d'Etat will always be a better horse than Improbable. That's just my opinion. I just, this question comment piece here, I'm not sure how we can criticize Tom's d'etat, but also compliment Improbable when look at this. Siri's talking to me now. I'm not sure how we can sort of compliment Improbable and knock Tom's d'etat for beating Improbable. Does that make sense? Just and please clarify if you could. I'm curious. And then the last one we'll talk about is this little question I got here earlier. I had a question if you haven't recorded yet. This is from B at Bradford16_ on Twitter. Going into the Oaklawn Handicap this weekend, who do you think are the top older dirt males by my standards and Tom's d'etat for me? I didn't do, and I haven't done any sort of a deep dive. I will say, I think by my standards is a really, really good racehorse. I don't know that he's necessarily gotten the credit he deserves just yet. Maybe this weekend we'll see a giant sort of influx in fandom for that horse. I think he's damn good. The Derby thing last year, I'm drawing a line through that. The way that he won down at the fairgrounds most recently, I thought was really strong. Let me pull up the field because I haven't taken a full look at it. And I know this is, again, going to be a little bit of a tangent here. Some of the other older horses off the top of my head, you brought up Tom's d'etat. He certainly fits in. I don't even know who many of the older horses are at this point off the top of my head. I'm trying to think. Looking at the rest of this Oaklawn field for the Oaklawn Handicap, Trophy Chaser has really improved in a big way since going out to 2 turns. I always thought he was best at 1 turn. He's kind of proven me wrong at this point here. Tacitus, I've made it clear. I was really high on him early, and he's lost me. He's a fine horse. He runs respectable figures. I don't think he's got that sort of killer instinct. I don't think he wants to go to that next level. Tax, he didn't really do anything for me. Doesn't get the juices flowing. I'll be very curious to see what the story is with Performer for Shug McGahee. Very, very lightly raced, but what he has done on the track so far, he's been visually awesome. So I'll be curious to see what we get from him if and when he comes back. I haven't read anything. I haven't seen anything. I can do one quick look up, and this will proper be the last thing I do on this week's pod, because he's just done a little bit of everything. He's done well going shorter, going longer. I'm sure all the issues this year with coronavirus have thrown a bit of a monkey wrench into any planning with this horse. Actually, he worked yesterday. He worked a half mile on April the 26th in 48-3. So maybe we'll be seeing Performer back at the track at some point in a race. He has been training pretty consistently. He had a little bit of a gap. He's had 2 little gaps recently in his tab, but he had been working. He worked consistently from February 6th right through March the 21st. Then he missed 2 weeks, came back on April 4th with a half mile, then missed 2 more weeks. That he's had 2 little gaps recently, but then he's come back and he's put back-to-back half-mile drills down at Payson, So Performer, maybe he's one that you want to keep an eye on as far as older horses are concerned. And we know Shug, as they get older, he typically gets them better. So we'll see what happens there. Questions, comments, concerns beneath the video player on YouTube. Probably the easiest way for me to see as far as the pod is concerned, but I am pretty good about responding to things over on Twitter at Bernier_Matt, whether it's here or just directly to you there. As always, thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review. Without that stuff, this isn't going to go anywhere. If you're over on YouTube, subscribe. Make sure the bell icon is lit up. That way you get any kind of a notification when something new is uploaded on the In the Money page. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel. That would be Matt Bernier. On Twitter, I'm at Bernier_Matt. Good luck this weekend, and this week, I should say. There's a number of things going on, but the Friday and Saturday are the big races down at Oaklawn. Let's hope. I haven't taken a look at the weather yet. Let's hope everything cooperates. You've got a beautiful field put together in the fantasy. Those 3-year-old girls, looks like it's going to be absolute showdown. Then you've got the split division Grade 1 Arkansas Derby on Saturday, the Oaklawn Handicap. Let me know your opinions. I'm very, very curious. I'm always willing to listen to other people's opinions and thoughts, but give me some reasoning behind them. Don't just say, this horse. If you like that horse, why? Let me know. Good luck this week and this weekend. I'll be back on Monday with episode 13. Until then, this has been episode 12 of the Matt Bernier Show. Good luck however you play, whatever you play, and wherever you play.